Hey, friends and neighbors, it's the old paratrooper. I am back again with another Tales from the Patrol Base, and I've got a very special guest today, Taft Yates. Man's had a hell of a career, Urgent Fury, Panama, helped start up Echo Company 51st LRSC, and he's also a member of the Ranger Hall of Fame in 2015. And it's just a pleasure to talk to him and talk to him about his career and what he's seen. Hey, man, Taft, it's great to have you here.
Well, hey, thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. And again, thanks for doing this interview.
Hey,
Okay.
no problem. Well, hey, man, if you kind of give us a little bit about your backstory, how you came in the Army, and we just kind of go from there, man.
All right, sure. Hey, I don't want to bore anybody, but it is a long story. And for me, it's very important. And for all of you out there, I encourage everybody to write your timeline down so that you can pass it on to your kids and your grandkids, because otherwise, they don't know about you. They don't know they know the person that's in front of them,
Mm.
and they don't know how you got there. Okay. And it's not to brag or be a spotlight ranger, so to speak, but it's who you are and why you are who you are. Okay. My story goes back to my childhood and before. And it starts with my dad. He was with the 24th Infantry Division in the Korean War when they lost half of their division. Okay. And it was ugly. And that was before my birth. All right. and and then I was fortunate, so to speak. I love celebrating our nation's birthday. I was born on the 4th of July. All right.
Awesome.
And when I was about 3 years old, we were my dad was stationed in Germany. And we saw these skydivers. And I told my mom, I says, that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Hmm.
And she said, you're not going to join the Air Force. All right. Well, life goes on, and my dad we got back to the States. He wound up doing his first tour in Vietnam with MAC-VSOG. And then, and I never thought about all this other stuff. I was just being a kid doing life.
Hmm.
Okay. And, and then he did his second tour, and I was in junior high school. His second tour in Vietnam, and MAC-VSOG again. And then about a month before he was due to come home, he lost a third of his leg due to an RPG.
Oh, my.
Okay. And things got jacked up a little bit, and he wound up um, spending a little over 2 years in the hospital
Mm.
fighting infection and recovery and all the above. And um, in June of 1975, mid June, okay, I decided I'd had enough just hanging around. I was bored with life
Hmm.
and went down to talk to the recruiter. And I was, a few days from turning 18. And when my dad come home from work, he had already been called. I didn't know
Hmm.
that. Okay. Um, and he told me I wasn't going to do it. While the recruiter came over to the house and convinced my dad to go ahead and sign the papers.
Hmm.
So then I wound up, I was in the last OSIT basic AIT at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Okay.
Okay.
Um, I raised my hand. I enlisted on June 30th, 1975. So just a hair over 50 years ago.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was down there, man. And it's something that somebody relayed to me now. And we have gotten too comfortable. Okay. We were talking about how people can't adjust to the heat and the environments nowadays. Well, that's because when we were joining the Army back then, there was no air conditioning in the barracks.
No.
Okay. And you just, hey, you learn to deal with it. But so anyways, I did my time, and I was to go to 3rd Battalion of the 39th Infantry at Fort Lewis, Washington, 9th ID.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up there, and the in a replacement company, and these guys wearing these funny looking uniforms and crap. They came in, and they were recruiting for a new unit. Said, "Hey man, you want to go? Anybody want to go out and stay out in the woods and live like, learn to live with the animals and stuff like this?" Well, I raised my hand. I want to go. And what'd you say that unit was? Says it was 2nd Battalion, 75th Infantry Ranger. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Airborne Rangers. I'm like, holy crap. Okay, so I get there, and there's about 300 guys, a little over 300 guys in the battalion. And at least 150 of us hadn't even been to airborne school yet.
Wow.
But we
Ground level.
but we still participated in everything that was going on, because back then, because I don't think they're really starting up new combat units now, but back then, starting us up, we had to get what they referred to as combat certified.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And blessed off by everybody. So we were going through what the field training exercises and um, Army readiness exercises, training exercises, RTEPs. Okay. And from everything from demolitions team, 2-man demolitions team, to aid and litter teams, anti-tank teams, mortar crews, squad, um, platoon, all the way up to battalion. Okay. So we were living in the field, and
Mm-hmm.
this was wintertime. All right. We were literally living in the field. We'd go to field on Mondays and come back on Saturdays.
Were you in Lewis, or were you guys going over to Yakima?
Well, we were everywhere. Some of the RTEPs were done most of them were done at Fort Lewis,
Yeah.
but then there were a couple that were done outside of Fort Lewis. The battalion, the culminating RTEP, the battalion RTEP in December of '75 started out with a frozen jump into Dugway, Utah.
Okay.
Okay, and over half the battalion was unable to jump due to weather.
Yeah.
How some of them made it, I don't know. But then we all finished the RTEP on Fort Lewis. We met them on the drop zone. The
Mm-hmm.
guys that came back in, all this, and we did everything: boats, rubber rafts, uh, air assault operations, airborne operations, you name it. Everything was everything that was applicable was evaluated,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no room for failure. And back then, there was no such thing as rasp, rip, or rope. Okay, you were thrown in, and all the NCOs were all the um, all the squad leaders and up were all basically handpicked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and all combat veterans.
Yeah.
Okay, and one of the guys that had the biggest impact, God rest his soul, he just passed away this last April. Um, a young man, well, I want to say young man, but Steve Boom Boom Mattoon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh, he did several tours with India Ranger Company in Vietnam, also with Special Forces. And this guy was just phenomenal. Okay. And it, whether everybody loved him, whether you didn't like him or not. You loved him.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just the way it was. That was the influence he had, um, and we lived hard. Okay, and we appreciated. We devoured our off time.
Hmm.
Okay, it was, you trained hard, you earned that off time. All right, and that's just the way it was. And there were times, hey, you'd come back in out of the field on Friday or Saturday night and get your stuff turned in about 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Hey, we still got time to go to the club. And you'd wind up at some establishment with a little bit of green still on your face because you couldn't get it all off. All
Yeah.
right. And so people knew who you were.
Yeah.
All right. And it was back then we had a revolving door, so to speak, and it didn't matter what your rank was. All right. Um, we went through in the first 3 years of existence, I will say we went through about 3,000 individuals to get to and maintain what then was our TONE fighting strength of about 556.
Hmm.
I mean, you'd wake up one morning, hey, you'd have this guy's gone. Okay. And I know it's an unwritten fact that if the senior leadership within your platoon and company did not think you could survive in a survival situation, somehow you were gone.
Yeah.
Okay, because these guys knew. Yeah, they will say no, we didn't, but yes, they knew. And as a leader, okay, you learn these things, and it's about the old adage of know your subordinates personally as well as professionally.
Hmm.
Okay, and so you had to. All right, and so that's the way it went. I also, uh, like I said, I enlisted 50 years ago on the 30th of June. 48 years ago, the 30th of June,
Yeah.
I graduated Ranger School.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and you hear of people going nowadays 6 months after they get there. Well, things were different back then. Okay, the Ranger battalions, the two battalions, didn't get a lot of slots for Ranger School.
Really?
Okay, well, because we were new.
Yeah.
Okay, and it had to be incorporated. And as a matter of fact, I was in the first large group from first and second battalions. We had 20 apiece
Hmm.
in my company, and in my Ranger class company.
Yeah.
So there were 40 of us from the total from the two battalions going to Ranger School. Okay, and that also ties in with something else that was that if you look back on history, okay, look all the way back to Darby.
Hmm.
Okay, the attrition rate for Ranger training back then and Ranger School today is basically still the same.
Yeah.
Okay, about less than 40% graduate first time going through
Hmm.
Ranger School, and not bragging, because I'm fortunate. Okay, but my hat is off to any individual that had to spend 1 hour more in Ranger School than what the going through the first time.
What the POI says. Yeah, like absolutely.
Yeah. So I look at that, and another thing that people ask, they have a misconception that most of your Ranger instructors come from the regiment.
Hmm.
Only about a third of them do.
That's
Okay, because
that's about right.
it's different. All right, and look back to when I went through Ranger School, there was nobody from the Ranger battalions as cadre in
Yeah.
Ranger School because the only cadre we had were uh, Vietnam War Rangers,
Yeah.
okay, from the Ranger companies, and so it was, yeah, so it was different. And Ranger School, it is a leadership course, but Rangering is in your hearts and your guts. Okay.
I believe it.
And yeah, it's a way of life. And even if you're not in the regiment, okay, it's on how you carry out your duties and responsibilities. Okay, period.
That's
All
one of
right.
the most true things I think I've heard in a long time.
And I hear guys, and I've lived the life. Okay, I hear guys, well, if you're not from the regiment, you're just a tab wearer, and well, here's the thing: try to be a ranger, a good ranger leader in a non-airborne or non-ranger unit.
It's tough.
That's where you prove yourself. That's where you prove yourself because being in the ranger regiment, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Everybody's motivated.
Okay, it's difficult to get there. It really is. All right, but once you get there, it's easy because all you have to do is your job and do it well.
Mm-hmm.
You got to want to do it, and if you do, you'll stay there and you'll be successful.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's just the way it is. You can, um, I see a lot of guys that get there and they can't. And I'll use this kind of thing here, that if you take 100 individuals and they go to basic training, AIT, RASP, and and airborne school, and into the regiment, no matter where, okay, and they're all infantry. In 4 years, and this does not count for combat, in 4 years, you'll have 10 of those guys standing there.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
That's due to injuries, whatever it may be, a lack of motivation, progression, whatever it is. But you'll only have 10 of those guys left there.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's the way, just like the attrition rate in Ranger School, that's the way you want it. That's how you're able to maintain your standard, and which I hear a lot about now is no standards, no standards, no standards. Well, here's the deal. TTPs and society change. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always go back to the Stone Ages. Well, back when I was a private, we did this. Well, I look at these guys now. Do I think that they can shoot, move, and communicate for weeks on end out in South Rainier training area with everything on your back? Not the way we did.
No, that's it.
Not the way we did. Okay. And that's not to bag on them because they're smarter now. Okay. Just like back in the day when we would go on a road march or we would go do a 10-mile run or whatever. Did we stretch? No, we ran. We did what we had to do. But now you look at these guys, they're healthier. Okay. Not that we weren't, we were just brutal. Okay. And that's how things change. But so anyways, I spent my time, we did all our little deployments, amphib training, this and that, my first 4 years. And then I reenlisted to go be a black hat.
Yeah.
Okay. And back in the day, the way it worked is at ground week, tower week, and jump week, you had your instructors there. The instructors were not in the companies.
Yeah.
The only NCOs in the companies were guys that could not make it as instructors. Okay.
They were just kind of herding cats, is what the
yeah. And there were 2 Ranger NCO slots at each phase of jump school, each week of jump school.
Yeah.
And so I got there, and so here I was, hey man, I was all high speed, low drag, buck sergeant, airborne, EIB, Ranger, Canadian jump wing, jungle expert, all the above. All right. Got my master blasters, and I look at it, that was probably not the best choice assignment that I ever had, because yes, I was technically and tactically proficient. Okay. However, as a buck sergeant, my maturity level just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that it was a bad assignment. It was a good one because I got to do what I love to do. I got to jump out of airplanes. I got to teach people, and I love spreading my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I love jumping out of airplanes. I jump sometimes 2 or 3 times a day.
Whew.
Um, I loved it. I would have fell out of airplanes for free. You didn't have to pay me to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So the Army lost all that money paying it to me. Okay. Over the years.
Yeah.
So then I spent a couple of years there, and my platoon sergeant told me and my ranger buddy that started the same time there. Okay. And back then, he told us, says, "Hey, your battalion sergeant major is, 'cause we both came from 275.
Mm-hmm.
He's down there recruiting privates. You might want to go see him, get you some letters of acceptance because I
Mm-hmm.
heard you wanted to go back." So we did. Okay. Now, I want to go back to when I started as an instructor.
Yeah.
Back then, you went through what they called a tango week.
I remember
Okay.
hearing about that. Yeah.
And you were smoked like you was a dirty leg ass private.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason for that, and especially because we were both Rangers, okay, the reason for that is they wanted you to feel the pain that you should not be bringing on to the students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a right way and a wrong way to um, uh, educate the students.
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit of smoke is okay, but to berate somebody is not okay. All right. So that's that was the purpose behind that. So, anyways, we got these letters of acceptance. Been there for about 2.5 years, and the Airborne Department Sergeant Major, equivalent to the Battalion Sergeant Major, says, "I'll volunteer you. You two are going to Germany." All right. We went to 2 separate brigades, and during my time there, I was there for about 6 months, and I was having a good time.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Training these guys, and
This is in Germany, right? Or
yeah,
okay. Yeah.
this is in Germany, and back then there was still a lot of residual effects from um, the Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, such as
Like 1981, 82.
yeah, this is 1981.
Yeah.
So there was racism, there was drugs, there was retired on active duty NCOs. Not all of them, but there was enough of them that it affected everybody. Okay, and I will say I love my Ranger First Sergeants. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This was probably the best first sergeant I know. I know it was the best first sergeant I had. Okay, this guy was a pure D leg, but
Mm-hmm.
he was a great first sergeant, and I was his go-to.
Yeah.
Okay, and you knew when he was pissed off at the company at the beginning of the morning when he would say, "Ranger Taft, get out here and conduct PT."
Mm-hmm.
So what he wanted me to do was smoke everybody,
Okay.
and that was the way it was,
Yeah.
and so okay, we did. Well, about 6 months into my tour, who comes to take over our brigade? Colonel Wayne A. Downing.
Oh wow.
Okay, there were 2 Ranger NCOs in the entire brigade, and they had messed up and put us both in the same platoon. We had both served in Charlie 275 together, and so what that did, they rethought some things, and our platoon became the rehab platoon for the brigade.
Yeah.
When you came to us, we were your last chance to soldier
Mm-hmm.
or get court-martialed, go to Leavenworth, whichever.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm happy to say um, we did get some guys turned around.
Well, yeah, probably using good leadership. That has a lot to do with a soldier.
Yeah, and it was it was great. It really was, even though it was a leg assignment, but that's what I'm talking about. It's on how you do your business
Hmm.
once you leave the umbrella of the scroll.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was 1 year into my 2 year tour, and I got a phone call from my wife uh, at dark 30 in the morning before PT.
Hmm.
Asked if I got the Red Cross message. Like, no, she explained. My son, it was 6 months old. He was born after I got left, came to Germany. He had developed pneumococcal meningitis
Yeah.
and was in the hospital, about to die.
That's bad. Yeah.
So I came home on emergency leave. Okay. And down around Portland, Oregon.
Hmm.
And one day I had to go up, first time I got to see my boy, he was laying in bed in the hospital with an IV sticking in his head.
Yeah.
God, I was hurting.
Yeah.
You're a tough ass airborne ranger, but man, that shit hurts.
I can only imagine.
And so I had to go up to Fort Lewis to do something, some paperwork stuff. And so I stop off a battalion and just see some of my old buds.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I figure I better check in at headquarters first. So when they see this guy in a non-ranger uniform walking around, they don't come and arrest me or something.
Yeah.
And the battalion sergeant major, Ranger Jack Voiles, okay, he says, or James Voiles, I'm sorry, Jack was his brother. And I'd known him since he was in E7.
Mm.
And in his voice, what are you doing up here, Ranger? And I told him, and he says, well, you're not going back to Germany. You're getting a compassionate reassignment back into this battalion. So Monday, you report over to North Fort and go to rope. So I did. And
That's pretty cool.
yeah. And so I'd started out in Charlie Company, and now I was when I finished rope, or well, my first 2 hours in Charlie Company.
Um, I can't hear you. Are you muted? Can't. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pause this until we can fix it.
This time I was a
We're
squad leader
back.
in Alpha Company.
Yeah.
Okay. And things were different. We now had bikes and Jeeps, and we were doing some shit called fast roping. And I'm like, holy cow, what is all? I mean, man, but it was good. We had some really good warriors. Okay. Things were different.
Yeah. Evolve.
And this is the evolution. This is what I'm talking about. As times grow, your TTPs change, your mentality changes, society changes, and you got to evolve.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was in November. And then in October of '83, we had we got the call to we got alerted, go to Grenada. Okay.
Hmm.
I'd been on staff duty the night before. And I figured we'd just going on another road march because that's what we'd been doing.
Hmm.
Road marching every Saturday for some odd reason. Battalion Commander Colonel Ralph Hagler. Road marching, road marching. And so I give my dog tags to my kids, and boom, we run off. Well, next thing we get in, hey, no, we're going to Grenada. Where's that? What is that? Okay. And so we start prepping up. And we get down to Hunter, and we find out that Hunter Army Airfield down there in Georgia, find out that, okay, 275, you're only taking in half your guys.
Hmm.
All right. And it was due to several reasons, aircraft shortages, plus the 1st Battalion were the ones on uh, RRF 1, which was
Ranger.
Ranger Ready Force.
Yep.
Okay. So they'd just taken over it. And so, by rights, that's the way it had to be. And So I didn't tell anybody I didn't have my dog tags. So hey, I jumped into Grenada with no dog tags. Okay,
Okay, jump
and
master.
and, and then we only did, it was a short mission. All right, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Our last mission for our company, for our battalion, was when my company loaded up on 4 Blackhawks and flew in onto uh, Calvigny Barracks,
Yeah.
and we crashed 3 of the 4 helicopters.
Oh shit.
Okay, there was 60 of us in the company that were on the choppers,
Were they
and
shot
on
down
that on
cannon?
that mission, we had 19 wounded, which my lieutenant lost his leg, and 3 killed.
Oh wow.
Okay, one short burst, but we continued the mission. All
Uh,
right, and then we get back from Grenada, stick around for a while. Now I'm platoon sergeant for weapons platoon,
mm-hmm.
and the regiment's forming up and this and that. And I feel very fortunate with that platoon. Each company, they have a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Okay. And this platoon, no, I didn't take them to combat. Okay. As a matter of fact, I was the only combat. Well, I had one other combat vet in my platoon,
Mm.
and he was a little private. Okay. He was the only private that we took into Grenada.
Okay.
Um, he was Lem Bravo cross trained as a
11 Chuck.
FO,
Oh, okay.
as an FO,
Yeah.
and really, really good guy. He got out in '86, and nobody knew where he was at.
Yeah.
And 6 years ago, I get a phone call from my office. Says, "Hey, this guy wants to know if you know this guy." So yeah. So 36 years later, I was the first one that this guy wanted to talk with.
That's awesome.
Okay. He had been off the net. But so anyways, I trained my platoon. We'd go out. I trained them old school. We'd go out. I had 19 guys in my platoon when I took over,
Mm.
and only 5 of us were Ranger qualified.
Yeah.
Okay. A year and a half later, I had 29 guys in my platoon, 25 Ranger qualified. 5 of them were Merrill's Marauders recipients.
Wow.
Okay.
Impressive.
And what I'd done, because the regiment didn't have pre-ranger set up at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody was taking any ranger school slots. I'm like, hey, I'm training my boys. We'll take them.
Yeah.
And it worked out. It worked out. And so then we move on from there. I re-enlisted to go to Florida camp.
Mm-hmm.
Got on Fort Benning, and they said, no, you're going to go train lieutenants at IOBC. In which that turned out to be I look at it in retrospect, a very, very good assignment, because I got to reflect everything I've learned down to these lieutenants. And there were 2 Ranger NCO slots in each company. And the reason they did this was because there were still a lot of a number of retired on active duty NCOs just hiding out there.
Yeah.
And so I got to do whatever I wanted to do. Okay. I was teaching patrolling, I was teaching leadership. I was in charge of pre-ranger type PT and stuff like this. And so it was really good. And to watch some of these lieutenants grow up to be battalion, brigade commanders, general officers, and things like that, and hear from them every now and then. That's it's a good thing. Okay.
You had a
It, it,
significant impact on them. Obviously, you got in right there to start. That's the best place to start.
yep. Well, a year into that assignment, I got orders in 1986, August of '86, um, that I was going to V Corps LRSC, Echo Company 51st.
Mm-hmm.
And so starting up that unit as a platoon sergeant, okay. Well, I came in as an L&O,
Mm-hmm.
but then wound up as you know, within a month, I was platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
Right? I was platoon sergeant when we activated, and we were writing doctrine, and so we were like scientists experimenting.
Yeah.
Okay, and with our NCOs, we had what would we have 40? No. We had 17 teams. Okay, and so two NCOs in each team. They were all ranger coded slots,
Mm-hmm.
and the majority of the NCOs came out of the Ranger Regiment,
Mm-hmm.
and a good number of those guys were Grenada Raiders.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we had to reconstruct the mentality. All right, your mission is not to uh, recon, locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. You've got to change that mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, and your mission is to recon and report.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's that. Now you also got to look. The other things that we had is that most of the E4 and below, which there'd be four on each team,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those guys were RIP rejects. Okay, so they didn't like Ranger NCOs, man. So
Obviously not.
we had to retrain their mentality. All right. So there was a lot of that going on, and then with writing doctrine, we did our first RTEP and it wound up being a battalion RTEP, and about a year and a half into this, okay, and we did a lot of time on the East German border,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and we got a lot of expertise from international long range patrol companies from various countries.
The
All right, a lot
ILRP school, the school.
ILRP school,
Yeah.
you name it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was good, and in that respect. Another problem that we encountered was everybody was complaining because we weren't jumping out of airplanes like we're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the time, with constructing this unit and writing doctrine and everything else, we did not have time to do because the only thing we'd have had time to do would be fun jumps on the weekends, and that's
Yeah.
a waste of money.
I
Okay,
yeah.
so we move on from there. I did 3 years, platoon sergeant and operations NCO. I did 3 years and got my assignment back into 275. They initially told me I couldn't go,
Mm-hmm.
and DA did. Well, I call them up and I says, I'm not going back because they told me I can't go back for a second tour. This won't be a second tour. This will be a third tour.
Third door.
And if you don't agree with me, call Regimental Sergeant Major Leon Guerrero.
Okay. Yeah.
He will tell you where I'm going. Okay. And so in August of '89, I got back to battalion. I got 1st Platoon Bravo Company. Okay. And it was, I mean, it was hit the ground running. Okay. We knew we were training to go to Panama.
Yeah.
We just didn't know when. And so in November 20th, we jumped into Panama.
Yeah.
And the difference between the jump into Grenada and Panama is okay. We were fighting a larger force, first of all, in Panama. And they got alerted to us coming in about 3 hours prior. Okay. And we were jumping at nighttime versus daytime. So there was more intense fire at us than there was in Grenada. And in Grenada, being it was daylight, you couldn't see the all the activity going on, all the gunfire. Okay, you could hear it, but you couldn't see it. All right, and so we had some injuries. All
You
right,
guys jumped on Rio Hato, didn't you?
yeah, jumped onto Rio Hato. My platoon and I love my guys. Each one of my platoons, like I said, have a significant place in my heart.
Mm.
Okay. Call it fortunate or unfortunate. My platoon had the main effort mission for the entire regiment for the first night. Okay.
Okay.
We were the assault force going on the 6th and 7th Infantry compounds. All right. And it worked. We took, all right. We did what we had to do. I did on our second compound, I did have my point man was killed and um, um, 5 wounded, all in one burst of fire.
Damn.
Okay. They were the guys from the first compound had retreated to the second compound and were laying in ambush for us. And but we took it. Okay. So we hung out there. We did our missions. All right. Got out of there a month and a half later.
Did you
Okay.
guys go down to the Comandancia, or was that?
My platoon, my company didn't. No,
Yeah.
we went to a place called a little town called Diaz.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and worked out there, uh, um, chasing down thugs and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, bad guys.
We kind of evolved into cops towards the end of that deployment. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we then we got back, and in '91, I I got assigned because it used to be a DA selected assignment, and most of your slots were NCO slots.
Mhm.
I uh, got assigned to JRTC, okay,
Okay.
Joint Readiness Training Center,
Was
and
it
I
in
will say
Arkansas, or was it in, had it already?
it
It
was
had
still in
already
Arkansas at
been-
the time.
Yeah, it
It was
already.
still in Arkansas, and
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, we spent so much time in the bush, all right, in the out training and everything. Uh, um, um, and it made you live your time off. When you had your time off, you had it and you lived it,
Hmm.
okay, to the fullest. And I got, again, I got to do whatever I wanted, basically. I was a platoon senior observer controller evaluator, company, you name it. I got to do all the special ops stuff. And I liked it because I got to reflect on nearly every Bravo company in the entire United States Army infantry. Okay, whether it's airborne, air assault, ranger, you name it.
Hmm.
And so it was great. And and I at one time I took all my stuff off my uniform because somebody mentioned it that yeah man the reason these guys listen to you is because you're walking around with that CIB and 2 combat jumps.
Hmm.
So I took it off a couple of rotations because I wanted people to listen to me because of what I was saying, not what they could see on my chest.
Yeah.
Okay. So we did that and it worked. And then I did my final assignment as a platoon sergeant, instructor slash first sergeant at Charlie Company, 4th RTB.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
And
years
so,
was that? If you don't mind, what years were you at RTB?
94, 95.
Okay.
So that was, and that was a good assignment. Um, I never planned on it, but it happened. So then I retired and I went into various forms of law enforcement.
Okay.
Worked in the prison system. Um, was on a police department later of about we had 40 people. I was on the little SWAT team, did that, and then I got a phone call says, "Hey man, you need to go do this." So I wound up over in Kuwait for 2 years,
Hmm.
training U.S. coalition forces in close quarters marksmanship, close quarters battle, counter IED,
Was
and that. Go
was
ahead.
Sergeant Major Purdy there then?
Yes, and at one time,
Yeah.
I never got the opportunity to work with Sergeant Major Purdy, but anybody and everybody within the Ranger community during that time frame, you at least knew of Sergeant Major Purdy.
He scuffed me up when I was in, me and several others, when I was in Ranger School. That I deserved it. It was awesome.
But as a matter of fact, Sergeant Major Purdy, him and I, we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
He actually worked for me for a short time
Yeah.
in Kuwait. Okay. And to have a legend working for me was incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did that a couple of years, and then I had a really good assignment. I started running around various countries in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
training African Union units for same company. I'd go for a month, come home for a month, you know, and it was just great. These guys were like, you're training young privates.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was MPRI, wasn't it? Was it?
Yep. Yep. It was.
Yeah. You and me know
And
some people.
no, and then shortly after, started doing that, my former chief of police says, "Hey, they got this new police department or new police chief over 15 miles west of us, and he needs some part-time help." And I gave him your name.
Yeah.
So they made a mistake and they hired me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I got to do what I wanted. Again, I wrote my own tickets, be it good or bad.
Yeah.
All right. Um, I got to train our department. I got to anything I wanted, but I was working so much that I'd have to call up MPRI and say, "Hey, get me out of here. I'm working more than the full-time guys." Okay. I need a country to go to.
Yeah.
So I'd go back to Nigeria, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, Ghana, wherever. Now I come back and go back to work.
Yeah.
And then I knew I had one more assignment to do. I had to go to Afghanistan. I spent a year over in Afghanistan training our boys and girls.
Mm.
And my son by then was a buck sergeant in 1st Infantry Division. I didn't get to go see him, but he was over there.
Mm-hmm.
That was his second deployment. And then came home and I got asked to apply to be the chief of police.
Yeah.
So I did. And it was I was a working chief. People didn't call me chief. They knew who I made sure people knew who I was, and you don't have to bow down to me.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is everything I did led up to the next thing.
Yeah.
From when I was 3 years old until present day.
Yeah. Wow. That's a pretty phenomenal career that you've had there. I mean, you and me, we met at the Long Range Reconnaissance Association rally, and that's kind of what got this whole thing going with me interviewing guys. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I will say this for Echo Company, you guys had a huge presence this year.
Yeah, I think we generally do. Okay, yeah. And because and I know everybody has their own way of doing things. We pretty well stay in contact.
Yeah.
A lot of us do. And even though it was not my premier assignment at the time, okay, and even though the company commander and I, Steve Powell, we butted heads. I fronted him out in front of a 3-star general.
Ooh.
Okay, he was wrong with what he told the general. And I said, "Sir, that's not correct."
No.
And we've talked about that every now and then. But if we need something, part of what I'm compelled to do is I do Ranger veteran issues, whatever. He'll text me or call me up, says, "Hey, you need to see what's going on with homeboy over here or this guy over there. Something's up." And so I'll do it, and then I will network, putting the best people involved to help situations out, and that is part of what I'm compelled to do.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And you're working with a lot of the Ranger you're working with WWAR.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second.
The Worldwide Army Ranger Association. All right, I'm on the board of directors for it, and it's more like an NCO-led Ranger group because the 75th Ranger Regiment Association, which I'm also a life member of,
Hmm.
okay, it's regiment driven or focused. Put it like that. Ranger companies from Vietnam, not LRP companies, but Ranger companies. All right. So if you were in the LRP company before it became a Ranger company and you weren't there for it being a Ranger company, you're not qualified to be in the 75th RRA. Okay. But if you were in a Ranger company or one of the battalions, you are, which that's all fine. Everybody has their slice of the pie.
Hmm.
Okay. And the U.S. Army Ranger Association, it's kind of like the way war is, except they're more officer oriented.
Hmm.
Okay. So to speak. And war is more like it being the
There we go. We had a little comms issue, and we were talking about the USARA and the WWARA.
Yeah, the WWAR war is more NCO oriented.
Yeah.
Okay, and I like it. And right now, I'm even doing fundraisers and stuff. I do these things. I participate in anything veteran. But hey, brother, I hate to cut it off,
Yeah.
but I've got a great grandson that's waiting on me.
Absolutely. I totally understand. And hey, folks, we appreciate Taft Yates coming on and talking to us, and hopefully we can talk again to see. And I'm definitely going to see you at the next LRRA or next LRRA rally. Okay,
All right, Ranger buddy. Hey, thank you for having me on, and hey, Godspeed, brother.
absolutely.